Welcome back to Landmarks Discovered. Last week, we continued our exploration of the work of the architect Belford Shoemate. This week, we'll introduce you to the architect Marion Sims Wyeth, whose architectural collection was also donated to the Preservation Foundation in 1993. In this episode, we'll be discussing Marion Sims Wyeth's design for 174 Via del Lago. As a Monterey-style home with French Creole influences, this house was built in 1934, which was the height of the Great Depression in the United States. It's interesting to note how this style was a direct departure from the Mediterranean Revival style that prevailed during the 1920s. In speaking with the author, Jane Day, of the monograph we're working on with her on Marion Sims Wyeth, we had a conversation about what is the architectural style of this building. And ultimately, she made a very strong argument for a Monterey-style building because of the cantilevered balcony, which is a character-defining feature of the primary facade. What makes it French Creole is the cast iron, lacy, detailed balcony railing.
This house is an early representation of this style, but it really started a new building trend here in Palm Beach. In 1934, this was kind of the new style that was being built here, but by 1936, 1937, these Monterey-style homes were popping up all over the town in Palm Beach, circulating a new wave of development here.
Yes, it's definitely tucked away on almost a 3-acre property and is one of the few historic estates in Palm Beach still left intact. So I think that the owners obviously had the wealth to build a large estate and to have all of the detailing and the incredible craftsmanship that is associated with the Mediterranean Revival style, but it's done in a more subdued manner that's less showy.
Yes, they definitely had the wealth. The owners were Dr. and Mrs. John Vittor. The wife maiden name was Eleanor Woodward. She was the Jello heiress. So they spent $125,000 on the house, which today translates to $2.4 million.
So you can imagine at the time there was just an extreme contrast between the everyday man and people like this that were building homes in Palm Beach at the time. 174 Via del Lago is known as Southwood, and it's located on Lake Wyeth, also known as the Intracoastal Waterway. The house is a U-shape, which maximizes views from every room of the waterfront. There's a great quote from Wyeth that speaks to why he utilized the U-shape so often. "My own style is quiet, subdued, and rational. Climate is important here. I try to make the outside part of the house."
Wyeth was a classically trained architect, first at Princeton, and then he studied at the École des Beaux-Arts. And you can really see that Wyeth's designs have a consistent brilliance in bringing together the basic elements of design, such as proportion, symmetry, and appropriate ornamentation for that style.
One of the things that Jane found during her research is that Wyeth actually received a degree from the École. So many architects at the time, they may have gone and studied there for a year or taken just a course, but he actually received a degree. So amongst all the architects in Palm Beach, he actually was the most educated.
Yes, he was at the École for 4 years. Southwood has been in the same family since the 80s. It was designated as a landmark in the 1990s and is currently undergoing a rehabilitation in accordance with the Secretary of Interior standards.
The restoration work occurring at Southwood is really exceptional because of its strict adherence to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. And we were lucky to speak to the restoration architect, Kristen Kellogg of Smith Kellogg Architecture, about that process.
So with every project we work on the island, whether or not it's landmarked, we start with research. Jose Rodriguez, the owner's rep and interior consultant, obtained an album of original photos of the house that are dated from 1935 to 1938. And because of those photos, in addition to the information we were able to collect from the town and also the Preservation Foundation, we were able to verify everything that was original in the house and also make sure that things that maybe we thought could have been original, we could verify that they weren't. And that was particularly important for us when we went through and did the doors and windows. We did a full door and window replacement for the property. And a lot of times on historic structures, this is where things can go wrong. Replacing windows that were, in some cases, original 1934 with windows from 2020, there's a lot that's different about those windows, from being impact to the kind of glazing that's used. And it's really important to make sure that you get those elements right because fenestration is such an important part of architecture. And it's also the part of architecture that gets changed out the most, particularly in Florida. Palm Beach is very generous with their door and window replacement policy. And I think it's the architect's responsibility to make sure that those doors and windows that are put in are as close as possible to the original. A lot of the doors and windows pocket, exterior doors and windows pocket, and that's a pretty unique feature. And the replacement doors and windows also pocket. And we were very fortunate to be able to work with a company to do that. There's also, behind me, you can see a segmented window. That is a new window that was replaced, and it looks very, very similar, almost identical to the original because of the extensive lengths we went to. One great example of repairing instead of replacing in this house was the molding detail. So we have crown molding in the living room, and we had to take that down to do a lot of the work that we did in this house. You can't tell because we were able to put things back the way they were, but we went into all the walls and redid all of the systems in there. And for the molding itself, we took it down with the intention of putting it right back up. And we were able to in some areas. In other areas, it warped a little bit. And so we were able to repair it in one area of the room, and we had to replace it in the other area of the room. On the front door, we have incredible side lights with iron detailing. And we also have ornate detailing all the way around it. It's a very special moment of the house. It even has the name of the estate, Southwood, above it. And we wanted to leave that as it was the best we could because you can never get it exactly the same when you replace it. In this case, for the side lights, it had been painted over so many times that the contractor went through with a brush and got as much of the paint off as they could and restored it. And during that process, they actually lost a piece of the ironwork itself. The superintendent took one of the moldings from the other side light and copied it exactly and then just repaired as needed. So even though we had lost a portion of it, we just recreated one small bit of it and were able to maintain the overall effect of the original side light and original front door. Some areas that we worked very diligently to restore as close to the original as possible were the front and rear balconies. They have some of the most intricate detailing on the exterior of the house. On the front balcony, we actually took the railings down and had them restored and put them back up. Also on the balconies, there's these unique attic vents that were originally in Wyeth's designs. There are several features of the house that were part of Wyeth's original design. The fireplaces and the mantles throughout are original. They have original marble. The detailing, the woodwork on them is all original. The flower cutting room is one of our favorite rooms that's original to the house. This room has a special sink with a cutout for the stems, and you would cut your flowers in there, and then there's shelving above it for all of the vases. So you would pick out your vase, cut your flowers, and arrange your flower arrangement in that room. Another unique feature of the house is the silver safe, and this is original to the house. The silver safe was used to store all of the silver for the house. So candlesticks, servingware, things like that were stored in the silver safe. When you walk into the safe, you sort of feel like you're going into a bank vault. The luncheon loggia is off of the dining room, and it was originally a screened-in area. So you had your formal dining room, and then you had a luncheon loggia that would be used for lunches, breakfast, things like that. The original estate was built on 2 lots. The landmarked house is on 2 lots, and then an additional 2 lots were purchased on which they put gardens. In the drawings from the Preservation Foundation, you can see the plans, the original plans that were designed for the extra 2 lots that were purchased. And 2 of the areas are just labeled jungle. The original estate was built in 1934, and then just a few years later, under a different owner, Marion Wyeth came back and built the playroom, which is now used as a bar or theater. It has a very streamlined style, but it also has all of the original detailing, including the original paneling that's in there. The bar includes an etched mirror, and we know that it's original because we went through the records at the Preservation Foundation, and they had hundreds of drawings, and we painstakingly, with the archivist, went through all of the files, and we saw the original design by Wyeth sketched out for that mirror. And that's part of how we know that it is original, and we were able to verify a lot of other things in the house were original because of those archives also. It's important to preserve properties, particularly this property, because of the history that's associated with it. These properties tell us about moments in time that are gone. So for this property in particular, it's talking about this community during the Great Depression and what that was like, what building was like, what living was like in the Great Depression.
What's really special about the restoration work that was done at Southwood is the incredible amount of research that went into it. One of the benefits to the project was that we had the architectural collections of Marion Wyeth, and so the restoration architect, Kristen Kellogg, was able to do a large amount of research here.
The interior designer for Southwood, Ruby Ross Wood, came to New York originally as a writer, and she ended up becoming the ghostwriter for Elsie de Wolf's book. Wood's first job in Florida was actually for a Spanish-style house, and she did not really like that style and considered it to be very ostentatious. There's a great quote in the Architectural Digest article that she calls Palm Beach style an orgy of false and fantastic taste. They
paired Wyeth and Wood to work on this project. So you can see how that's emblematic of their taste, the Veters, how they wanted to live.
They wanted something more subdued.
Exactly. So they paired this architect who was known for his more subdued work and this interior designer who clearly did not agree with the prevalent interior design style of the 20s.
Exactly. So you have this more classic look in an era of the Depression that is classically graceful while still being expensive.
Yes. And then you've got that very interesting penguin room.
Exactly. So in this Southwood vintage book that was found, there are some great interior shots, and there is one room that is just all penguins.
The wallpaper, the figurines.
Everything.
Full-size stuffed animals. On our next episode of Landmarks Discovered, we'll journey back to a period earlier in Wyeth's career with his design for E.F. Hutton and Marjorie Merriweather Post's Hogarcito.